What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel, and I'm going to be rounding out my quarterback ranking videos for the 2020 season. Today, I'm going to be giving you my top 10 quarterbacks in all of the Group of 5 and independent teams for the 2020 college football season. So there were a lot of great nominees for this list, and I do feel like I have the top 10 quarterbacks in Group of 5 and independent. All these guys on here, for the most part, I believe are returning. I think pretty much all of them on this list are going to be returning starters, and I expect pretty much all of them to stay on the level they are or only get better in 2020. So we're going to go ahead and kick off this list here. Number 10 is Chris Robinson of Florida Atlantic. So he normally, I think, would be higher on this list, but because Lane Kiffin is departing from Florida Atlantic, I do think his stats are going to go down a little bit, but he's also losing a pretty good tight end as well. He still has some good weapons around him too, but I just don't think he's going to be coached as well as FAU. So his stats may decline a little bit, but let's look at what he did last year. 3,701 passing yards with 28 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions, a 62%. Completion percentage in the 144.9. Pass rating. I like watching Chris Robinson, and I do think he's going to be a fairly good quarterback this year. He makes smart throws with the football, doesn't force anything that he doesn't have to. I just expect those passing yards to go down this year because Lane Kiffin is leaving. Doesn't really like to run the football. Maybe could run the football more so than he usually does this year. Again, a lot of his stats this year are just going to rely on the Lane Kiffin departure. Still a very, very good player, and I expect Chris Robinson to be a top 10 quarterback in Group of 5 this year. Move on to number 9, and that is going to be Desmond Ritter of Cincinnati. I think this guy is very underrated, in my opinion. Now, he is losing Michael Warren back there at running back, but still has some good weapons around there at wide receiver. We look at what he did last year: 2,164 passing yards with 18 passing touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Only a 55% completion percentage and a 123.7 passer rating. It's not terrific numbers, but they are still very, very solid stats. He can also run the football as well, 650 rushing yards with 5 rushing touchdowns. I expect him to be a big reason why Cincinnati is going to be a big competitor in the Group of 5 field this year. I have them as my my third best Group of 5 and independent team, only behind UCF and Notre Dame. I think Cincinnati is going to be a top 25 team. I still currently have them in my top 25, and Desmond Ritter is a big reason why, because although they are losing Michael Warren, Desmond Ritter is still a playmaker, and while he didn't have a great season last year, I do expect him to have a much better season this year in 2020. So we're going to move on to number 8, and that's going to be Lane Hatcher of Arkansas State. A lot of guys out there may not have heard of this guy, but I watched a lot of tape of this guy making this list, and he was a very highly scouted player by Nick Saban of Alabama. And if he was highly scouted by Nick Saban, then he was a pretty darn good player. We'll look at what he did last year. I believe he was a freshman, almost 3,000 passing yards with 27 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 66%. Completion percentage of the 167.9 passer rating. Those are some good stats for a freshman. Could cut back on the interception numbers a little bit, but I think that's just going to come with experience. 46 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown on top of all of that as well. And while Arkansas State might not be the best team out there, Lane Hatcher definitely has so much potential. And like I said, he was highly scouted by Nick Saban of Alabama, which is absolutely huge. He ended up going to Arkansas State, close to his hometown. So I couldn't see Lane Hatcher throwing for 3,000 yards again this year. He's just that talented of a quarterback. You know it if you watch him. He is absolutely phenomenal. I expect him to cut back on these interception numbers. Passer rating maybe to go down a little bit, but overall, I expect him to make an overall slight improvement in the 2020 season. We're going to move on to number 7 here, and it's a fellow Sun Belt quarterback, and it's going to be Zach Thomas of Appalachian State. It's very close to me between Lane Hatcher and Zach Thomas, but overall, I am going to give Zach Thomas the nod because he does have more experience than Lane Hatcher. And we look at what he did last year: 2,718 passing yards with 28 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions, a 63% completion percentage with a 148.7 passer rating, 440 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns as well. Definitely can run the ball better than Lane Hatcher can. But I love watching Zach Thomas now. He is losing his leading rusher, Darrington Evans. So they're probably going to have to rely on him more so than usual to throw the football. And I don't think Zach Thomas is going to have a problem with that. You see, there are only 6 interceptions, a 63% completion percentage. He makes smart throws with the football. And I always like watching Zach Thomas. I always like watching App State. And I just think that as the season goes on, Zach Thomas just does really get better and better. Can be a little inconsistent at times, but overall, I really do like Zach Thomas this year. And I am going to put out a bold prediction here. I think he's going to have the best season of his career here in 2020. That's just what I expect from Zach Thomas. We move on to number 6. And this might be a surprise to a lot of you. It's going to be Dustin Crum of Kent State. I really, really like Dustin Crum this year. I watched a lot of tape of him as well. And oh boy, did he impress me. 2,625 passing yards, 20 passing touchdowns, only 2 interceptions last year with a 69% completion percentage and a 159.7 pass rating. 2 interceptions was among the lowest in all of FBS last year. You see there's 707 rushing yards with 6 rushing touchdowns, so he is a dual threat quarterback. And in my opinion, the best quarterback in the Mid-American Conference, and he belongs to Kent State. Kent State is a fairly decent team, and while they don't have necessarily terribly great weapons out there at wide receiver, Dustin Crum is just too much of a playmaker. He can absolutely sling the football, and he can beat you as well. He reminds me of Justin Fields of the Mid-American Conference, although I do think Justin Fields is better. But Dustin Crum does remind me of Justin Fields a little bit, and just he can beat you with his arms and his legs. He's very shifty and very deceiving. And I expect Dustin Crum to have a big 2020 as well in a Kent State program that, in my opinion, is heading in the right direction. He does have a lot of tough games this year. Kent State has to play Alabama. Kent State's got to play a lot of tough games. I believe they also have to play Penn State as well. So I think if Dustin Crum can perform big against those 2 pretty solid defenses, he is going to have an absolutely huge 2020. Number 5 for me is Hank Bachmeier of Boise State. So he, Chase Cord, lots of other guys kind of split time last year. But in my opinion, Hank Bachmeier is going to emerge as a starter this year and going to emerge as a true quarterback and play most of the minutes for Boise State. 1,879 passing yards last year with 9 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So I think he threw the most interceptions on the team and didn't quite throw for the most touchdowns on the team. I believe a couple other quarterbacks threw for more touchdowns than Hank Bachmeier on Boise State. This year, I expect him to have maybe 2,000 passing yards, double-digit touchdown passes for sure, cut back on the interception numbers, maybe just a little bit. Expect him to maybe have 5 or 6 this year. Last year, he also overall had a 63% completion percentage with a 142.7 passer rating, which is pretty darn good. 69 rushing yards with a rushing touchdown to go along with those stats as well. Hank Bachmeier is a guy that I have been looking forward to play in a college uniform ever since he was recruited by Boise State. And really, he is, I think, has a lot of untapped potential that he just hasn't seen. He just split a lot of time. And I don't quite know what they're going to do over there at Boise State, but I do expect Hank Bachmeier to end up being the full-time starter over here for Boise State. And I cannot wait to watch the improvements that he and the coaching staff has made for 2020. We're going to move on to number 4, and that's going to be Shane Buechele of SMU. He was a transfer over from Texas many years ago and has since absolutely lit it up at SMU. We look at what he did last year, 3,929 passing yards with 34 passing touchdowns and 10 interceptions, 63% completion percentage with a 148.8 passer rating, tack on 105 rushing yards and a couple of rushing touchdowns as well. Now, his passing yards number and his passing touchdowns number were some of the highest in the entire nation last year. And an SMU team that was really, really good. Now, they are losing Sam Prochet there at wide receiver. But I do think Shane Buechele still is a very, very good playmaker. He really can throw the ball. He has made some absolutely phenomenal throws that I don't think a lot of quarterbacks in the Power 5 are able to make. So Shane Buechele really does impress me tenfold. And while I don't expect the stats to improve this year, I think they're going to have to rely on Shane Buechele a little bit more because he doesn't have Sam Prochet out there. The running back is a little bit of a concern, but I do believe they are returning running backs there at SMU. But I think they're going to rely on him more so this year than in previous years. And I expect him to have possibly another 3,000 passing yard season in 2020. We're going to move on to number 3, and that is Dillon Gabriel of UCF. The UCF quarterback is very interesting for me to figure out because Darrell Mack has played some minutes too. We don't know if Mackenzie Milton is going to come back yet. He's like 50-50 as we've heard from him the latest. But I'm going to go ahead and go with Dillon Gabriel just because of the uncertainty of Mackenzie Milton. And I just don't think Darrell Mack is as good as Dillon Gabriel. We look at what he did last year. 3,653 passing yards with 29 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Overall, 59% completion percentage with a 156.9 passer rating. Tack on 78 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns as well. Dillon Gabriel has impressed me. He played really, really well as a freshman last year, and I think he only has room for improvement to play. Or excuse me, I think he only has room for improvement in 2020. I've had some UCF fans tell me that he is playing better than Mackenzie Milton did his freshman year. The stats do show it as well. He was splitting time with Darrell Mack, and if he was the full-time starter, he probably could have got to 4,000 passing yards like Mackenzie Milton did in 2017. So I'm going with Dillon Gabriel here to start for the UCF Golden Knights, and he is a big reason why UCF is my favorite to make the New Year's Six Bowl for the Group of 5 spot. Has some great wide receivers out there with Amari Johnson and Trey Nixon. Lots of good guys out there for UCF. Some pretty solid running backs back there as well. So Dillon Gabriel's got a lot of talent around him. He's definitely going to have a huge statistical season in 2020. We're going to move on to number 2 here, and that's going to be Ian Book of Notre Dame. We look at what he did last year, 3,034 passing yards with 34 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a 60% completion percentage. Overall, a 149.1 passer rating. Tack on 546 rushing yards with 4 rushing touchdowns as well for Ian Book. Now, he is losing his top 2 targets in wide receiver Chase Claypool and his tight end Cole Kmet. But I think Ian Book, he's very inconsistent in my opinion. I just think he's going to get more consistent this year and play at a higher level than he has in years past. Now, 3,000 passing yards with 30-plus passing touchdowns and under 7 interceptions is still a high level, but I still think Ian Book can play better, and I think it's really going to have to show out this year because he is losing his top 2 targets, so he's going to have to find 2 new top targets here, but he can still run the football. He's got lots of great potential there at Ian Book, almost done with his college career, and this year I expect Ian Book really to, I think, surprise a lot of us here in 2020. But the number 1 quarterback in the Group of 5 and independent squad, it was a really easy pick for me, and it was Brady White of Memphis. He has just been absolutely phenomenal since he stepped into the Memphis uniform. And we look at what he did last year, 4,014 passing yards with 33 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions, maybe could cut back on that with a 64% completion percentage and overall a 165.0 passer rating. Tack on 4 rushing touchdowns with that as well. Brady White is an absolute machine over there at Memphis. Now, he is losing his pretty much cheat code wide receiver Gibson, but he still has Kenneth Gainwell in the backfield who can catch balls out of the backfield as well. I expect Brady White to have another 3,000 plus passing yard season. I don't think he'll quite get to 4,000 this year because of the coaching change. Of course, Mike Norvell is moving down to coach at Florida State, but I still really do like Brady White this year. I think he is by far the top quarterback in Group of 5 and the independent teams. He is just an absolute machine, and I cannot wait to see how he improves on his game in 2020. All right, that's going to do it for my top 10 quarterbacks in Group of 5 and the independents for the 2020 college football season. And if you guys enjoyed, please do leave a like. Also consider subscribing if you are brand new to the channel or you just enjoy my content, and turn on the notification bell to join Tailgate Nation. And if you haven't done so already, please do leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the quarterback group in Group of 5 and independent this year. And as always, until next time, remember to play hard, but tailgate harder, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.